So I'm going to welcome everybody here that's joined the webinar. My name is Eric Holman. I'm with the Lake of the Ozarks Convention and Visitor Bureau, and I'm the web admin and internet marketing here for the CVB. And we have Heather Brown with the Convention and Visitor Bureau, the executive director for the Convention and Visitor Bureau, on here as well. And then the team from McDaniels Marketing, Randy McDaniels, and then I'll let you introduce your team, Randy. I think I know most of them, but I see a couple of new faces.
Absolutely. No. And I have Zach Singleton. Zach is one of our SEO specialists, and he does a lot of work in ADA. And then Bridget Norman, account manager for Lake of the Ozarks CVB, is on as well. And if we have other team members on that I don't know about, I don't see them to know who they are. So, okay.
So
go ahead, Eric.
So I'm gonna let Randy kind of take this over. This is a ADA compliance for websites webinar. This has been kind of an interesting topic here at the Lake of the Ozarks that you may or may not be aware. There's been some lawsuits filed by what we would call predatory attorneys that are going out and searching websites and trying to find holes in people's websites when it comes to ADA compliancy and filing websites. And that has led us as a CVB to evaluate our own website. McDaniels Marketing is taking care of that, which McDaniels has been working with us for the last 5 years on funlake.com. So they've been going through that process for the last few weeks on our own website. And then we just thought it would be a good idea to have a couple of webinars and try to bring our members on board and let them kind of hear this presentation and ask any questions that they may have. Hopefully be able to give them a better understanding of what the ADA compliancy is for websites and what some of the things that are coming down the pipe and how that may change and protect their own websites. So with that, I'm going to turn that over to Randy and his team, and they can do the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. Just had to turn our fan off. We had a little heater on.
It gets very hot in this room.
Yes. So this presentation is called Access Granted. So we're going to cover the importance of being ADA compliant on your website. And it doesn't matter, whether you're a nonprofit organization or a for-profit business. Everybody has to start to look at this because there's a lot of rules coming down from the federal government that are already, going to be in place this spring and then more the next year. And then, of course, as Eric was talking about and Heather, there's some predatory law firms that are out there going after people, and it has happened at the lake. And we will talk about that instance later in the presentation and what happened and how that was remedied. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So what is website accessibility? It's the practice of ensuring that people with disabilities, and mostly, visually impaired, that's the biggest issue, but it can be others as well, can effectively perceive, navigate, and interact with and contribute to content on your website, right? So it's all of those factors that we look at when we talk about website accessibility. So why does accessibility matter? Well, there's three main reasons, and one would be compliance with federal regulations and funding protection. That would be for those organizations that get federal funding. So most of you on this call, that does not affect you. Two would be to mitigate the risk of costly ADA lawsuits. That's the first and foremost. And then, of course, third, it would be it's the right thing to do for customers and communities that are trying to access your website. So, just really looking at digital accessibility, it's really no longer an option. And to look at it from the standpoint of legal compliance, risk management, and customer experience, all three of those aspects are really important to look at. Whether people are looking to research products and services, make a purchase, access some kind of support, or simply engage with your brand. So some of the experiences that people have when they're using the web, of course, customers research businesses online before ever visiting. digital accessibility builds that trust and confidence for guests and patrons with disabilities before they arrive. So it's much more than just having ramps to your building. You need your website. It's really the first portal or a port of entry, using nautical terms, to your business or organization. So the ADA requires equal access. The problem is many of these sites that are out there fall short, and everyone's learning how to get to the accessibility standard. And then the other challenge is maintaining it, which Zach will cover. So in terms of opportunities from digital advancements, customers expect very accurate, detailed information online before they visit, right? So they got to be able to access it. And a lot of these, visual impaired individuals are using screen readers, and your website has to be able to interact with those screen readers. They're not just using the tools we're all used to, or somebody who can't, they don't have use of their hands. There's just a lot of different types of disabilities that exist that cause other technology to be plugged into a computer to access the content of a website. You have online ordering, reservations, scheduling. Digital touch points often shape that first impression of your business or organization.
Yeah, and it's really a double-sided coin. So in a lot of ways, these advancements in the digital experience have opened up doors for the disability community. Like Randy was saying, they can research places and shops before they even go to make sure that they're going to have an accessible experience. They can do that research that they need to do. But then on the other side of that, there are very significant gaps in the digital world. So Randy mentioned this, but 95.9% of websites right now fail WCAG standards, which WCAG standards are the standards by which the ADA decides whether or not a website is compliant. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. So most websites right now, a disabled person will most likely experience some sort of barrier when they're accessing the content online. But with these advancements, a business's web presence is almost as important as its physical space. So like we were saying, it's the first port of entry, like Randy mentioned. And so ensuring that your website is accessible is going to make it more likely for people to feel comfortable and confident to go to your physical space as well. Some common barriers just generally include poor color contrast on your website. So thinking about, can people read the text compared to the background of your web page? Missing all image tags, inaccessible forms, timeouts. These are all important barriers to consider. And one really important kind of term or tool in this world of accessibility is screen readers. So screen readers are a form of assistive technology that render text and image content as speech or braille output. So really, when we talk about web accessibility, we're really talking about is your website able to be interacted with a screen reader? If it's not, that's a big barrier for most disabled people who are accessing a website. And we actually have two examples for you guys to show you. These are two videos of different disabled people using a website. One's on mobile, one's on a desktop, using a screen reader, just to kind of give you an idea of what that experience is like.
And they're both visually impaired. One's desktop, and then the other one is a mobile evaluation.
A screen reader is a program that you can put on your computer that will help someone who is blind navigate and read the content on the screen. It runs completely by keyboard commands rather than the use of a mouse, because that's challenging for someone who can't see the screen. When a website is not accessible, it's the most frustrating experience, because I am doing all the commands that I know typically work on a page to either get to an edit field or tell me a heading or different things, but they aren't working like they should. So I hit subscribe after filling out the username and password and all the information I asked for. And it's not telling me anything, like if the page reloaded, if there's an error. So I'm gonna go to the top of the page and hit H for heading.
works. Sign up for a subscription today and you'll receive full day monthly shipment of 4 bullet
And looks like for some reason it didn't go through, but I don't have any error field. So it's not telling me what's wrong with this page and what I need to fix. And maybe call me impatient, but I don't typically sit around and sit on that page a long time trying to figure this out because it's so frustrating to me, and it's not worth it to me to get all worked up about something when I can just move on to a different site.
Yeah, and so my biggest takeaway from that video is always at the very end, she says, you know, if she encounters a barrier, what she's most likely going to do is actually just hop to the next website, go to a different business instead of picking up the phone and calling.
I am not able to see what's on the screen. I'm holding it in front of my face right here like I can see it, but I can't. When I unlock the screen here and turn on my speech, I can touch the screen, and instead of activating something that I touch with my finger, it will read it to me and tell me what it is. And if I want to activate it, I touch the screen twice quickly to activate it. And that means that I need to explore the screen with my finger, or there's another command I can use called the swipe right and the swipe left. And that's it. Very similar to using the tab or shift tab keys on a desktop.
Phone number.
MM. Okay, that's probably a month. That's probably a day. Yai, which usually means multiple Ys. I'm gonna see if I can figure out how many Ys. I'm using the rotor to go to characters. Okay, 4 Ys. There's only so much you can control about how the screen reader pronounces Y, but you can certainly label these fields. I'm experiencing, as an assistive technology user, your website differently than a visual person would, but they're part of the same code base. It's the same website. When you invest in accessibility, you're going to find a lot of things with your website that you didn't even know were issues for everybody.
So pretty interesting to see that from the viewpoint of a visually impaired user, right? Both on desktop and mobile. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and my biggest takeaway from those videos is, you know, it's your website. It's the same website, but somebody who's visually impaired, somebody who's disabled, is going to have a totally different experience. In some ways, it's a totally different website that you have to think about when you're thinking about people's online experience. So all this, why does web accessibility matter? 1 in 4 adults live with a disability. And when you think about it, most people, me and Randy, everybody, will at some point in our lives need extra assistance, most likely. So when we're talking about accessibility, when we're investing in accessibility, this really does matter for everybody. Again, accessible business is a welcoming business. If someone can't navigate your website online, they're going to be less likely to want to shop or book with you. Like we've mentioned, ADA-related lawsuits are on the rise, and you'll see a little bit later, those ADA-related lawsuits are actually pretty predatory and not actually serving the disability community like they claim. And accessible websites just in general expand your customer base and improve satisfaction. I'm an SEO specialist. Investing in accessibility makes it more likely for your website to show up in front of people when they're searching online. Some common challenges for business sites are kind of expanding on what we said a little bit earlier. Typically, there's a lot of dynamic content. So you think about online menus if you're a restaurant, booking engines, event calendars. There's a lot of various things that you add to your website as a business that can affect whether or not your content is accessible. There's obviously a heavy use of images and videos and PDFs. Making sure those things are accessible for somebody who cannot see is really, really important, and being compatible with those screen reader tools. Third-party integrations, so thinking about reservation systems, ticketing forms, And there's just a general lack of in-house accessibility across the board. Where do we start? What does it mean to actually be accessible? What's the checklist of things to focus on when you're thinking about accessibility?
So again, what are the benefits of prioritizing this, right? So mitigating those frivolous lawsuits, the conformance with WCAG requirements, optimizing SEO, and extended market reach. So, Google's and other search engines do give a bump in score for pages that are well optimized, that have alt image tags on them. In other words, labeling an image, right, with a mouse over, where you can see that if you ever image, you mouse over an image and it has a little label on it. That label speaks to the screen reader, right? And even labeling fields in a form. That's what they were showing in those videos too. The frustration because the fields aren't like they can't talk in that form to the screen reader, so they're just guessing how to fill it out. So it's just hard for them. So we got to make it easier. So you definitely have the ability to get greater online reach. Being accessible means opening your website to 25% of the population living with a disability. That's a 25% increase in the potential reach of your online presence. Customers of those disabilities, seniors, ESL, non-native English speakers. That's the other thing too, is translation, international travelers, all of that to take in really into consideration, right? The Lake of the Ozarks, of course, attracts people from all over the world. Especially during some of the boat shows and all that. So improving your website's SEO, accessible websites do rank better in search, as I said. And when you format a web page with accessibility in mind, you're more likely to be scraped by AI crawlers, right? So like ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity, and used in those AI responses. So accessibility, just remember, equals discoverability. And then there's also improved customer loyalty. So patrons with extra needs, or the family members of someone with extra needs, remember that it's a kind of a family unit, often just want a place where they know they will be included, just like everyone else. Knowing your business or website is accessible is a big win for attracting repeat customers. And Zach's going to cover like putting statements on your website to really give that indication that you care about this, right?
Yeah, it really is all of this is a balance of these technical things we're talking about, and then also just simply serving the customer, serving the community. But right now we're going to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty on the American with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. We say ADA a lot, but kind of talking about what does that actually mean. So it is a civil rights law, came into law in 1990. It prohibits discrimination with disabilities, and it applies to all public accommodations, but it's recently interpreted to include websites and apps. The goal is, across the board, whether you're talking about a physical space or a digital space, that's equal access to goods and services and experiences. And essentially, if you manage or build a digital experience for the public, the law applies to you. So we mentioned this before, but the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or the WCAG, those are the guidelines by which the government assesses whether or not something can be ADA compliant. So it sort of defines the best practices and design rules for web accessibility. There's a lot of different versions. I think you noticed on a previous slide, there's a WCAG 2. Whatever. There's a lot of different versions of it, but the WCAG 2.1 at the AA level is considered the gold standard for compliance with the ADA. And we'll get into a little bit more about that. That's the very nitty gritty. So when we talk about audits, when we talk about fixing those accessibility problems on a website, that's really kind of what we're talking about. So the WCAG is built around 4 key principles. So it looks at whether or not a website is perceivable. So that's making sure the content is presented in clear ways that people can recognize and process with their senses. And so with their senses is an important part of that. If somebody is visually impaired, that means making sure, your images do have text behind them so that they can still access that content. So is all the content when you look at a page perceivable to whoever's landing on that page? Is it operable? So is it interactive with things like screen readers, different input methods? Is it understandable? Is it structured in a simple, direct way? And again, that's a huge part of SEO. So even just thinking about optimizing a website in general, accessibility does come into play there. And then robust, making sure your website's code. This is kind of the, more of the back end technical stuff that I really enjoy that most people don't. But a website's code should be written in adherence with those standards, the ADA and assistive technology. So we've mentioned this a few times, but without accessibility, your business can face costly legal risks. About 250,000 businesses receive an ADA-related demand letter every year, and that's actually on the rise as the years go on. We're in 2026 now. Average settlement cost is around $35K, and even small businesses and restaurants can be targeted. I know kind of the perception of this conversation for a long time was it's really only big organizations that really need to care about this, but we're actually seeing a rise in small businesses and small organizations, even restaurants getting targeted with these lawsuits. But what's really frustrating about these lawsuits is it's actually, again, I mentioned this before, it's not the disability community kind of rising up and going after these inaccessible websites. It's actually a group of about 50 plus law firms whose business model revolves around exploiting a gray area in the ADA. So most lawsuits aren't from visually impaired people. And risk mitigation really means focusing on those common, really easy issues that are targeted by these firms. So essentially what these firms are doing is they're running automated scans on websites, very quick scans that anybody can do, and identifying accessibility issues. And they're looking at what's called an AIM score. And if the AIM score is below a 9, that's essentially just an open door for a lawsuit. And, we mentioned earlier that 95.9% of websites fall short of the WCAG standards. Most websites also are below a 9. So this is really low-hanging fruit for these predatory law firms to do this. So it may target sites. This isn't totally proven yet, but it may target sites that use an accessibility widget. Essentially, what they'll see if you use accessibility or something like that, they'll see that as that business is trying to put a band-aid over a greater issue. And so even if that's not true, they will likely target that website to see if that's the case. They can move forward with a false positive. So a lot of times these scans, because they're scans that anybody can use, they're not super robust. They're not super in depth. And so even if something is below a 9, it doesn't mean a website is actually inaccessible. But if they have that on paper, they can use that to move forward with a lawsuit. And their hope is that people will simply settle instead of actually fixing the issue, because making your website totally ADA compliant can be a really costly thing. And a lot of people do, the cost benefit analysis of, oh, we'll just settle now. And hopefully, it'll pass.
It'll go away, but then they settle and they're still non-compliant.
Exactly.
And then get sued again.
Yeah, exactly. Repeat lawsuits are happening as well. And then in light of all this, so we're talking about these predatory law firms, but then there are some genuine shifts in the government and how they perceive the ADA that are changing. So Title II is a big one right now. Under ADA Title II, all state and local government bodies must ensure that their services, whether in person or online, are accessible to people with disabilities. Not every business falls under Title II, but essentially what that means is anybody who receives federal funding needs to be ADA compliant by April 2026. So that's the big thing right now. They're really cracking down, and the deadline is April 2026, that if you receive federal funding, your website needs to be compliant. And so again, while this doesn't apply to everybody, so not every business, these developments are pretty significant and kind of, they signal a major shift in how seriously I think the government is wanting to take this. So again, who's covered by Title II? Any city and town website, school district portals, public transportation, a lot of these like big public accommodation type organizations. But again, if you receive federal funding, this does apply to you.
Makes sense, right?
It does.
Those are the people that need to serve absolutely everyone in every capacity, but it's going to be very necessary for like, and kind of in the order, but government, so that would include schools, hospitals, very, very important, banks, very, very important. And then from there, everybody else. And that's kind of the way it's going. But the sooner it is something that you get after and get taken care of, the better you're going to sleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. And so for those businesses who fall under Title II, what the government is asking for is a voluntary product accessibility template, or a VPAT. And essentially what the VPAT is, it's just this, it's a very long document. I have an example there. I'm not going to show you because it is, again, very, very long. But it essentially takes your, so you'll do an audit to see what in what ways is your website inaccessible. You do a fix, and then the VPAT is all of those fixes listed out as kind of proof that you've done the work, that your website, you've done the work to make your website accessible. And so, if the government or these lawsuits come around, you have this proof to say, no, like, we've done the work, like, we care about this. This is what we've done to improve our website.
Yeah. So for example, we're completing all the ADA compliance work on fundlake.com, like literally this week. Yeah. And then they'll end up with the VPAT, they'll end up with videos that prove that the site is compliant. And so that's really gives you all that evidence to be able to file a lawsuit if one would come up, and also just proof that you've done the right thing and the site is functioning better than it did before. So,
yeah. So again, just some key dates. It's interesting how they've kind of broken it up. It's based on population, but April 24, 2026 is any state or local government serving 50,000 people or more. And then April 26, 2027 is for smaller entities and special district government. So anybody below that 50,000 comes in 2027. All right, so we get practical. We've talked a lot about accessibility in general, kind of how to think about it, what to think about. We're going to start to talk a little bit about what does it actually mean to be accessible? What can I do today to make my online presence more accessible to people?
Then this also really goes through our process for risk mitigation and ADA compliance.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to talk about, again, this is a little bit more big picture, but compliance versus conformance. We called this presentation ADA compliance, but it's important to start thinking about a shift from trying to make your website ADA compliant to conformance and risk mitigation. Again, to be totally ADA compliant, one, can be really expensive to achieve, and two, does not last forever. Websites are a very malleable thing. You could do all the work to get your website totally ADA compliant, and then by the next month you post a blog or you make an update on a web page, and suddenly you're not ADA compliant anymore. It's a very precarious place to be. So conformance really is the thing when you think about actually serving people, actually mitigating your risk. Conformance is sort of the term that I try to preach to people. Is that's really the main goal of all of this. So if you mitigate your risk now, you actually have the time and space to actually focus on making your website accessible to real users. It kind of gives you that room to breathe, to come up with those best practices, those solutions that as you're adding new content to your website, moving forward, you're going to be accessible. Right. So yeah, again, prevent and respond to ADA lawsuits. Organizations across America are getting sued for violating the ADA, but most websites don't intend to violate the ADA. And so what you can do now, if you do have a lawsuit or if you do need to do some work on your website, that first step is that risk mitigation. What can I do to get your website in a place that you're not going to get one of those frivolous lawsuits. You're going to be able to be okay with Title II and have that room to breathe to actually focus on accessibility. So our process is audits and mitigation is the first step. So you want to see what are the actual errors on your website. And so we recommend using reliable automated scanning tools to identify the top level errors on your site. And what's really great is these are actually the tools that these law firms, those 50 plus law firms, are using to start these lawsuits. So one is the Wave Chrome extension. That's something that anybody can add to their Chrome browser. And what it does, it'll crawl the homepage or whatever page you're on of a website and pull like as many errors as it can on that page. And it categorizes them based on different levels of the WCAG. And it gives you an AIM score again. And Lighthouse is another one. It's another free tool that Google offers that you can use to scan your website. And again, it'll list out the errors on your website and kind of based on the standards. And so you can see how vulnerable is your website currently in terms of accessibility. So again, lawsuits often occur after a claimant does a quick scan of the site. So fixing those top level issues. So if you do this audit, you see these issues, fixing those issues really does go a long way in preventing those lawsuits, gives you that room to breathe. But it is important to note that those automated scans only curate about 30% of issues on your website. In order to do a full scan, you need to go page by page and fix those errors. And so a lot of what you're going to find in those scans, the top level problems, this is kind of a checklist to go through to see what you can be working on. So some of the big things are, allowing for keyboard only navigation. So when you think about someone using a screen reader, or even the videos that we saw, they were using keys. They weren't able to see the screen, but they were using keys to navigate the content of a website. So making sure no matter, where people want to get to on the website, they can tab over to that place. And so I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is a great slide to either take a picture or screenshot. We'll share the slide deck after this. But this is a good checklist to refer to as you're kind of doing those audits and doing those fixes for your web team. So those are the kind of first step things that you can do. But in order to actually, achieve conformance, actually kind of go after this, a manual accessibility audit and remediation is what you need. What this means is you have your site evaluated by a real visually impaired or disabled person. And what they're going to do is they're going to assess whether or not your website is compatible with a screen reader, if they have the keyboard only navigation operation orientation, is there alt text behind images, and all of that. And they're going to kind of put together a typical user journey on your website. So when somebody lands on your website, what are the pages? Where do they usually go? And they're going to identify any barriers with a real person who's going after or who is on your website accessing your content. And these manual audits, they do provide insight where accessibility software and scans cannot. So that other 70% that those automated scans do, this is going to catch the rest of it. So kind of what all needs to be done on your website. So how it works, the first step is that audit, like I said. You come up, what are the issues on the website? The next step is remediate. And so again, this is what we've been doing on the Fun Lake website over the past couple of weeks. We did the audit. Now we're doing the remediation. We fix any code, we fix any content that has issues. We're doing testing. So once we do the audit, once we remediate a lot of things that we see, we do another test to make sure there's nothing that we missed, and kind of go through that. So we're remediating all of those issues. We create an accessibility statement to put on the website. And we document all this. So step 3 is documentation. We have the before and after scans to show, these were the issues before, now these issues are gone. And then the big thing is a screen reader video. So we actually provide a video of somebody who is doing that typical user journey, not experiencing any barriers, to kind of prove that a real visually impaired or disabled person can access this website without any issues. And those videos, if in the case of lawsuits that we've seen, those videos are really the trump card in terms of actually proving that your website is accessible. And then there's training. So we do 1-hour training sessions, any other documentation that you might need. So if somebody did need a VPAT, like a more specific document for this, that would be provided. And then, ongoing opportunities to talk, and then monitoring and support. So like I said, you can do all of this work to get your website in a good place, but the next month, your website's going to be a different website. You're going to add more content, you're going to make updates. And so continual monitoring and support is a really important part of this accessibility process.
Yeah, part of that is once you get the accessibility to where you feel it should be, then when you're publishing new content, you're following best practices for ADA compliance as you publish the content. And then you run scans to see if the site still is within that normal range.
Exactly.
So
so this reporting and data is really important, having that proof. It's not a substitute for a legal team, but having all this documentation, doing all this goes a long way in protecting you. But some important documents to have is an accessibility statement, which we'll talk about a little bit more here briefly. That's a front-facing document that you put on your website to show we care about accessibility. An accessibility policy is an internal document that you have just with your team, with your web team, to know what are your best practices for ensuring your website is accessible. So if you're, posting a new page on your website, what are the steps that you take to ensure that is formatted correctly, all that sort of stuff. Any sort of conformance reports like VPATs if necessary, and then audit results. So that before and after audit result is really important. So like I said, creating a strong accessibility policy is really important. And again, this is the framework that defines how your business approaches inclusivity, compliance, and digital responsibility. This is a document, while it is something to be used for your team, again, this is an internal document, the policy is. Having one in your back pocket if you were to encounter a lawsuit to show like, no, we actually have some best practice, some norms around this as a team. That proof can go a long way in protecting you as well. And this policy does not need to be on your website. Again, it's an internal document to know, what are best steps for your team.
Yeah, but it can cover facility accessibility
Mhm.
and technology accessibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the accessibility statement is that front-facing, public-facing statement that you have on your website that communicates your organization's accessibility efforts. So we care about accessibility. This is what we do to care about accessibility. And I think the most interesting part of an accessibility statement is it actually acknowledges the areas where you may not meet standards. So part of that front-facing document that you have on your site should say we care about accessibility. We recognize that we're not perfect, that you might encounter barriers on your site. If you do, please reach out to us. Even that good faith step can go a long way, again, in protecting your website. And yeah, again, directing users how to get help. So again, it demonstrates accountability and transparency. It's important for it to be concise, approachable, easy. We'll show you an example here soon that Dog Days actually created. And it can be less detailed than your accessibility policy. Your accessibility policy needs to outline your norms. This is just a statement to say, this is what we care about. And this is something that you can actually do tomorrow. Even if your site hasn't been fully audited and remediated and you've done this whole process we've been talking about, you can post on your website and say, we're in the process of working on this. Our goal is to do this. Again, if you encounter any barriers in the meantime, please reach out to us. This honestly can be just a great first good faith step to care about this issue.
So here's an example. So Dog Days was, of course, the business that was fed a lawsuit, fought it, remediated, and settled. And they published this accessibility statement, and it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty short, but you can find it on their website if you go there. Provides a phone number, provides an email. If anybody sees anything that's an accessibility barrier, please, they ask like put that in the subject line, and then we'll take your feedback seriously and make sure we get back to you on that issue. And this just goes a long way about commitment, right? Commitment to conformance, accessibility on websites.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And this is another thing, again, God forbid, but if you were in the throes of a lawsuit, this is something else that you could point to say, we're aware of this, we care about this.
Right. So some tools for accessibility tool belt, so to speak. So you have the Wave Chrome extension and Lighthouse. So those are two of the tools that we use to scan. Those law firms also use those same tools. So they're looking at those scores with these two tools. So the Wave Chrome, runs entirely within your browser. It keeps all the data local with no information sent to external servers, which is nice. Provides a comprehensive testing and very versatile access in terms of different browsers. Lighthouse score compares your web page's code against the WCAG level AA standards, and then it generates a score and then gives you issues reporting. So these are great tools, regardless of whether there were lawsuits or not, to be able to utilize. So these would be scans that we'll continue to do, say, for example, on funlike.com and other client websites to make sure they stay within normal range.
Yeah. And these are tools too. If you do talk to your web team, I'm sure that they are already aware of these tools, but to make sure that they're using them regularly on your website is an important piece to any sort of optimization work.
Accessibility radar is another, basically our monthly monitoring service. It is basically built in to identify those new accessibility issues early before they become a liability. Every month, this tool scans your website. It uses the same scanning tools that those law firms use. So you can see that. So for example, this site, we blocked out the URL, but this one had a Lighthouse score of 72 out of 90. That's a problem. 178 errors. So it's a mess. So a lot of work to do, not even close to be compliant. So this is the type of score you don't want, right?
Yeah, and this is the tool that we use for that full manual audit that I talked about earlier. So if you're doing the full audit and remediation, this is the very in-depth radar that we run on your site. It takes into account Lighthouse and Wave, but then it is able to go kind of page by page to give you a more detailed report on all the things that need done.
Yep. So again, accessibility radar, monthly scans. So you'd want to do consistent automated scans to maintain that ongoing ADA conformance. You have the outstanding issues report. So it's nice. It produces those. It tells you what the issue is. So you can see that to your right there. And then it gives you a real-time dashboard access all the time. So this is a tool we use and we're going to continue to use to keep all of this accessibility on our radar and the radar of our clients. Accessibility widgets. So like Accessibility, you've probably seen this symbol before. We've used it on quite a few client sites. Can be a good first step to a good faith option, but an accessibility statement's actually better. And we are moving clients away from using like widgets like this and doing the compliance instead, which actually can save them a little money because this is a paid widget. It doesn't cost a lot, but it really isn't very effective compared to doing the full compliance.
Yeah, like I said, it's a lot of these law firms will see it as, even though it's not, usually it is a genuine good faith effort, they will see it as a band-aid to say, oh, there's issues on this site and they're trying to cover it up. That is not usually the actual case, but that is the case that these firms will make.
Yeah. So again, next steps. So developing an accessibility statement and policy, very easy to do, whether you're fixed or not, right? Evaluating the current website accessibility using the Wave Chrome extension to identify those top level issues right away. Review the client's compliance checklist, make those optimizations to your current website. Add the accessibility's best practice to your norms and procedures when making changes or adding content. So that's really critical, just having accessibility in mind and being trained in it. And then consider pursuing a professional accessibility audit or remediation to be fully compliant and protected. And obviously, our firm offers that. We also offer website development and other support with digital marketing, but we can do remediations individually if someone needs help with that, certainly. But we just today wanted to extend the information and the expertise we've provided to our valued client, the Lake of the Ozarks CVB, and extend that to partners. And we've been doing a lot of these partner webinars for various CVBs we work with in different states to help their local businesses and destination partners be aware of this, so we can all be helping each other in essence. So with that, we thank you for your time. And do you want to see if anybody posted any questions on the chat? Or anybody can just bring something verbally and we can answer it now. Let's see, might be one.
My mic was off. Randy, I do have a question. If somebody uses the Wave or Lighthouse and their score is good, like decent, should they, as a small business with very limited budget, do they need to still do the full audit, or do you think they're okay if they do their best with like the accessibility statement, all those other things?
I would say it's still worth getting a quote on
what it would take.
What it would take, because like I said, those tools that we showed, they give you a good idea of where you stand. So if you're above that 9, that is great. You're probably good to not have to do a remediation.
Mhm.
But that ally radar that we showed you, that is way more in depth. It'll get into the code, it'll get into all these things. So it's worth knowing if there are any deeper issues. But in terms of urgency, I would say that website's probably in a good place at baseline, but it's still worth, in light of what's happening with the government, in light of what's happening with these lawsuits, in light of how often a website can change and shift. All of those reasons are why I would say I would still pursue a quote on something just to see if there's anything deeper.
Because every estimate we do have there is individual. Like there's no standard to the way the time that it takes to do this. Depends on the size of the website. So yours is obviously very substantial. It's huge, right? But somebody else's, a small business, might be what, 10, 15 pages, maybe a third of the cost, right? It may not even be that bad. So it's just worth getting a quote. A quote's free, and they can decide that if they want. But we are not attorneys, so we're not going to give legal advice, right, as to when or when not to do something. But we can at least provide the tools for them and the costs necessary to make a decision, right, whether or not to do it. But
Yeah.
obviously, a good score is a good thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you know, just because again, we have a lot of small businesses in our community, very, very small businesses, and some of them use website builder companies to help them build a site like Wix and things like that. Do you know if they have this built into those third-party website building, or I'm just curious in case someone asks.
Yeah, I highly doubt it because WordPress is even off the shelf, and we're doing tons of ADA compliance on that. And unless you physically type in the alt image tags and do all that, they're just open fields.
Yeah.
It's just a database tool.
Yeah.
So it's garbage in, garbage out, just like anything, right? It's like Microsoft Word. It's a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think it does.
Well, and the other thing
It has tools.
It definitely has tools. And I will say, so one of the reasons we have that slide on conformance versus compliance is you do have to be a little bit wary of anybody who says we will make your website ADA compliant.
Yeah.
They will maybe do things to help with compliance,
For
to help
free.
conform.
Yeah, for free.
But
it takes time.
But if somebody says, I would be wary of that and do a little bit more digging on what do they actually mean by that. So.
Yeah, and it looks like Sydney had a question, like, do the law firms go after all websites, a blog, for instance? I mean, if it's an individual blog, by an individual person, they're probably not going to be real excited about going after that. They're going to go after businesses that have bank accounts, right? I mean, they picked on Dog Days. We know the owner owns multiple bars, right? They're gonna go after those kind of people. They know they can get them to settle, hopefully. And it's sad they're going after small businesses like a restaurant that are super busy. They don't have time to mess with this stuff. I know how hard it is to run restaurants and boat launches and all that stuff. And it's just like all of a sudden they get a letter. It's like the last thing they need to worry about, right? So I think that's why it's so important to do this, to help everybody understand what's going on. Not everybody gets to go to conferences like you guys do and hear some of these things from people like us. But heck, this is all new, And I have to give credit to Ed Schmidt. So Ed Schmidt, we partner with Ed Schmidt. We do work with him and Tammy. And they shared with us a lot of information. We got on this, and they had already dealt with the Dog Day situation, and we've since applied all of that knowledge to Fun Lake. So always have to call out Ed.
Well, there you go. Hey, we don't say that when he's in the room, though. Right?
No.
Don't
tell him. Don't tell him.
No. But I will say, I do also want to state that a lot of people thought, I just want to touch on this again, because we were also these people, maybe not Eric, but myself. I don't want to speak for him, but when we threw Accessibility up on the website, we thought we were covered. We thought, hey, we were doing what we were supposed to. And that really has become more of a red flag more than a tool. More people that see that say, hey, let's look deeper into the site because they think they're good. And that's when a lot of these people, because a lot of the clients that, let's just go back to Ed, that he had was under that impression as well. And then they still got flagged. and it is not a tool that's truly fully compliant.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I will say, just for everybody's encouragement, I guess, that did used to be best practice. Like a few years ago,
It
Accessibility,
did.
that was like Ed was advising correctly. That was the best practice. But that's just how quickly things shift with this whole world. So while it used to be the best practice, it's no longer the best practice. And so that's part of the reason as well that we're doing these webinars, trying to get this in front of people, because a lot of people think they're okay when they're not. And those
It's,
yeah.
there's just a lot of law firms that are built around, different business models around like little loopholes in laws, or like one chemical. Like there's whole firms that are built around suing Bayer Monsanto over glyphosate. That's all they do. They'll have 7 lawsuits that'll fund their whole year. Like it's crazy. It's just a different world. And not all attorneys are, out there to get everybody. It's just that's kind of their business model. And we just have to adjust to it and be able to defend it.
Yeah.
So
well, and that's why it's
Go ahead,
important
Heather.
on the state level to also advocate, guys, for the businesses on here to be watching for that legislation. Encourage your local reps to still pursue this, and if you need to go and testify at the Capitol, I think it warrants that, because even if on a state level they make it a statute to where, hey, let's say a business gets told you're not in compliance, this law would then allow you to have so many days to rectify your site. May not say, hey, let's just give them a free pass, but it at least gives you an opportunity. Whereas right now, if you get sued, you have nothing. Like you just have to either fight it or do a payout. And both of those are extremely expensive.
And extremely distracting, right?
Yeah.
To people trying to do their jobs, right? That's the worst part about a lawsuit, is the distraction, unless it's a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. I mean, but these are kind of petty lawsuits, but it's something that distracts you away from, productive work.
Work you care about.
Yeah. So, and I did answer Sydney's additional question there. So,
Yeah, good question.
Anybody else have any questions? This is an interesting topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we've had, what is it, Heather, at least 2, if not 3 of our board members that have been subject to these lawsuits. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I think, just so everyone knows, some of the lawsuits, they make you sign an NDA, which is the law firm's way of not letting this kind of get out. And so some of our board members have fought that NDA and paid more. And so it just gets really ugly. And when we say they've had to pay out, we're talking upwards of $60,000. I'm not sure, Sydney, what you had to pay, but it was really disgusting, the amount of money they had to pay, when again, they thought they were doing it. They weren't being terrible and negligent. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that, Heather. Yeah, that's good to know.
So an audit, the way we looked at it as a board, is an audit is way cheaper, staying ahead of it, and just keeping this as part of our business model is a lot cheaper than a lawsuit.
Yeah, in most cases, for just average size websites, these projects are like under $10,000, so a fraction of what a lawsuit would cost to do the remediation. So. And again, it is an improvement in SEO. There's other benefits from it. That's what's nice about it. It's not just fighting off the lawsuit. That's why we wanted to make sure with this talk that we did cover the other benefits of doing this.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it does help your website as a whole.
Yeah.
Can I also ask, with everything with AI, when you make it conformed to be more accessible through ADA, does that also assist with AI and what it's doing now?
Yes. Yeah. Because essentially what you're doing, if you're making your website more accessible, is you're making the content on your website easier for anybody to access.
Any machine.
Or any machine to access.
Which is AI.
When you think about, like, AI uses crawlers similar to like a search engine or Google crawler. You've heard that term, like you have those bots who are scraping the content of a website and then using that content to answer people's questions. AI crawlers are the same way. And they'll be able to more easily access the content on your website to then use that in their responses on ChatGPT or something like that if people are looking for more information.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good too. So there's another benefit.
Yeah.
So,
You can add that to the list, Randy.
yeah. Any other questions, comments? Okay. All right.
I
With
do
that,
appreciate your time, Randy. Thank you guys.
Absolutely. We're doing this for a second time this week as well to accommodate other people's schedules. So this has been fun. Please reach out if you need help. Obviously, Heather and Eric know where to find us. We're happy to serve. So
Yeah, if you have any
Right.
questions, always reach out. We'll pass those on. We can pass those on to Randy and his team and get some answers for you. And we can get anybody in contact with them too if they want, they want some work done. So.
yep, even just a quick scan is fine.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Thank you
Thank you,
all.
guys.
Appreciate it. Have a good evening.